What is going on, Colts Nation? And welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guy, Cody here. Guys, wanted to give you a recap from today's second joint practice against the Detroit Lions. A couple housekeeping things before we kind of get into practice. First off, the Colts did place tight end Drew Ogletree on the injured reserve, ending his season. Ogletree was found out after yesterday's practice. He got injured and he actually tore his ACL. So he is officially on the injured reserve for this year. Obviously sucks for Ogletree, and he was doing a lot of good things, in camp and in the preseason and things like that. So we wish him the best in his recovery. But without further ado, let's get into it. So a couple notes here about this practice here, the second joint practice before the Colts and the Lions play on Saturday. The first thing, Matt Ryan overall, 9 of 12 today, talking about, some of his completions. His biggest target was Michael Pittman Jr., who obviously had he had a really good day one, and it seems like he continues to be targeted as well. Some things from the offense, I guess we'll start here. Some things from the offense. So day one of the joint practices with the Lions, the Colts actually, their run offense kind of struggled a little bit. It seemed like today they kind of got back on track in that department. But I would say this, the Colts in situationally, when it came to the goal line, they kind of struggled today. Detroit's defense got the best of them. They started hot. They had a couple nice, plays and things like that, but they really struggled. And that was kind of different than we saw the day before, where the offense just honestly completely dominated the Lions defense when it came to all these situations. They struggled a little bit. I'm talking about the Colts had a fumble on 3rd and goal. Deion Jackson fumbled a handoff from Matt Ryan, and they didn't score a touchdown. And this was both the first and second team. So the Colts offense, it was weird because they had some nice moments, but when it came down to situationally, they kind of struggled today. Detroit kind of held when it mattered. And so that's a little bit concerning, I suppose, if you're talking about that. Kind of looking at they had a 4th down chance, and Paris Campbell dropped the 4th down pass. And then, another guy who also had another drop is Kylan Granson. And guys, I don't know. To me, this kind of is like, why are the Colts so hesitant to sign a veteran wide receiver? Because it feels like every day we just hear a couple guys here are dropping passes this day. Oh, the next day, a couple other guys are dropping passes. Regardless of how you feel about the talent in terms of the wide receiver position, I just feel like, the provenness right now outside of Michael Pittman Jr., there's just not a whole lot of it. So it's kind of up and down from day to day from some of these wide receivers, which is why I feel like veteran wide receiver is a must. Obviously, Stephen Holder tweeted out earlier today and said, the Colts like who they have right now. And I'm just not a fan of that approach. I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think it can be both. Like, you can like these young wide receivers like Alec Pierce and Ashton Dulin and all these other guys. And you can also sign a veteran, understanding that these guys are still young and they're still raw and they're still learning, right? And you need a guy like Ashton Dulin, I think, to, be kind of a special teamer, because he was one of your best special teams players last year. And I feel a lot more comfortable with him being a 4 and a 5 and playing a key role on special teams as well. So that's just kind of my opinion on it. And obviously I want to see a little bit more from Kylan Granson as well. It seems like he keeps every single day. It seems like he has at least a drop. And so I don't like to hear that. I don't like to hear that he's continuing to struggle with the drops. So he needs to get better in that department. He needs to do something, because that was a question he had in college coming out, and it seems like that's kind of followed him so far into the NFL level, at least in training camp so far. So he needs to clean that up as well. A couple things here. So Jared Goff had a decent day against this Colts defense. A couple guys on offense who stood out today for the Colts. Jalani Woods had a nice afternoon. That's great to see, because obviously with the injury to Drew Ogletree, it's like, okay, you needed Jalani Woods especially to start stepping up. He had a nice afternoon. He had 3 catches in team drills, and his first 11 on 11 catch from Matt Ryan as well. So that's great to see that he's already starting to do that. A couple other guys that kind of stood out the early part of practice as well. Interesting enough, talking about Mo Alley Cox, Michael Pittman, Jelani Woods, another guy who stood out ever since he's come back is Mike Strawn. He continues to show out, which, guys, honestly, if he continues to show out, I would say don't sleep on him potentially making, that wide receiver number 5 position. I mean, and that's great to see. I love to see that he is continuing to just, show out the first couple days he's been back from that injury. Like he had that meniscus tear he suffered in OTAs. So good to see him continuing to do it. And, I think right now the Colts have said for this Saturday game, the second preseason game, the Colts are not going to play any of their starters, right? So it's going to be Nick Foles, Sam Ellinger, and it's going to be also Jack Cohn as your three quarterbacks for Saturday's scrimmage. But I think these 2 days have been good for the Colts in terms of just playing against somebody else, right? And so there's been some things of concern. I think, kind of seeing this concerned, obviously, about the offensive line. It seems like there's been moments when this offensive line hasn't necessarily been the best, primarily left tackle Matt Pryor. And honestly, right guard Danny Pinter, I'm a little bit concerned about as well. Talking about he kind of got worked on day one. Didn't really hear anything from his front today. So hopefully he cleaned it up. And Quentin Nelson was struggling a little bit. So this offensive line needs to get in sync. I think they're extremely talented. They have the potential to be one of the better offensive lines in the league. They just got to, knock some of the rust off a little bit and have some better days and start stacking those days on each other as well. I think a little bit of concern also beyond the starters is just some of the key backup guys, specifically tackle. Dennis Kelly, obviously still injured, still out for a while. He hasn't practiced in a while. He got injured in the early days of Grand Park. And after that, right now, the second team O-line is a little bit concerning, specifically the tackles as well. Isaiah Rodgers was still out of today's practice. He had a concussion. Obviously, Dennis Kelly was out as well from this practice. Shaquille Leonard continues to be out as well. So just a little bit about how the starting offense and defense looked today. So you had quarterback Matt Ryan, Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, Paris Campbell, Ashton Doolin, Mo Alley Cox, Matt Pryor, Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, Danny Pinter, Braden Smith. Starting defense was Yannick Ngakoue, Grover Stewart, DeForest Buckner, Kwity Paye, Zaire Franklin, Bobby Okereke, Kenny Moore, Stephon Gilmore, Brandon Faison, Julian Blackman, and Nick Cross. The last kind of thing I want to talk about, guys, some guys that stood out today, I kind of mentioned them already a little bit. Jelani Woods had a nice day. Great to see him do that. Pittman had a nice day. Hines had a nice day. And a couple other guys I thought looked good as well. The final injury report I mentioned, just a couple of them, just wanted to talk about the final injury report for today's practice. Players who did not practice today: Shaquille Leonard, Chris Williams, Dennis Kelly, Kiki Kuti, Isaiah Rodgers, JoJo Doman, Armani Watts, and Will Redmond. Guys, the Colts have tomorrow off, and then they will be playing their first home game of the season in the preseason, hosting the Detroit Lions. No starters will be playing in this game, so we're going to be looking at some key position battles. But guys, that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Hopefully this was insightful to you, kind of talking about the 2 days of joint practice, which I do think ultimately were good for the Colts in the long run. So that'll do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, guys, go Colts.